council and the manager and the attorneys as to what's out there, what's the feasibility of doing a study, is it even worth our money and time. So for those people that are here that think we're coming to take their homes tonight and that you're going to be part of the city tomorrow, that is a misnomer that somewhere has been sparked amongst the rumor mills, so I just wanted to put that out there. Mr. Manager, please have it.
Yes, Vice Mayor, our Planning Director, Joe Cordino, will be giving a brief presentation, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much. As the manager said, I have a brief presentation tonight, and really what we wanted to do is, just like the Vice Mayor said, is just enter into a conversation about annexation, whether we would like to move forward, look at it, or not. I wanted to discuss this evening a couple of things. Number one, why we're here, just that process. We'll give some historical context to this type of thing. We'll talk about our options, and then we'll open it up for a discussion. Annexations and incorporations had been stopped during the last several years. There has essentially been a moratorium in place on these things, and that ban has been recently lifted. And so if you look back through the history of the county, we have a long history with incorporations and annexations. In fact, we are a very young county when you really get down to it, really at the beginnings of our development. And so these types of things have been part of that brief history. We were created in 1836, if you can believe that, but we weren't given a real county charter till 1957. And in 1957, the Home Rule Charter created a two-tiered form of government. The first tier is the county, and the second tier are the cities. And the county government is a thing called the UMSA, U-M-S-A, and that's the Urban Municipal Service Area. And effectively what that is a big giant city that the county provides municipal services to. So the same things that we provide as the city of Homestead or any other city provides to their citizens, the county provides that to the unincorporated area, and that is the UMSA area. Again, the county form of government is the dominant tier. Today, I believe that more people live inside incorporated areas as opposed to unincorporated areas. I think that less than 44% of the people live in unincorporated Miami-Dade County as opposed to municipalities. The fact of the matter is that this has a lot to do with growth. It has a lot to do with our style of growth and the fact that we have an urban development boundary. And there are two different forms which this would take. Our neighbor to the north, Broward County, has taken a very different approach to growth management. And their model has been that they have incorporated all unincorporated areas, and their model for growth was they had developed on all the available land. So if you go out to Sunrise, for instance, right next to their levee, we have a levee in Miami-Dade County, but we're protected by the urban development boundary, which says you can't really, the urban development boundary is meant to move, it's meant to move, but in a planned fashion. We make sure that every so many years they entertain moving that boundary. Broward County is developed on all their land. Now, their land is completely built on, but it's not completely built out, which means that as they intensify and more growth comes to Broward County, they're going to end up having to intensify various nodes and redevelop those. Miami-Dade County looks at it in a completely different way. So if you look back at the history of the county in 1960, after the county had been given its home rule charter, there were just a few cities. We are here in Homestead, Florida City, Miami Beach, Hialeah, Coral Gables, Opelika, Miami Springs. As you moved forward to the early 1990s, you started to see a wave of incorporation that took place. Started with Key Biscayne, followed by Pinecrest, Sunny Isles Beach, and Aventura. And a lot of municipalities were getting, a lot of neighborhoods were starting to get the feeling that they just weren't being able to have the services provided to them at the level that they desired to make them comfortable. Mainly land use, a lot of times police. By the year 2000, that wave of incorporations had continued, and you saw cities start to stretch out: Palmetto Bay, Doral, Miami Gardens, Cutler Bay, Palmetto Bay and Cutler Bay, specifically in South Dade. Miami Lakes had done it at the same time. And at that point in time, the county put a thing called mitigation in place, and that was for cities that were actually going to make money off of the corporations. They had to pay essentially a mitigation fee back to Miami-Dade County. Since that time, the county has ended that mitigation fee. By 2005, the moratorium had been imposed, and it had stopped different incorporations and annexations in many of the cities, a lot of them in the central part of the county, Doral, Virginia Guards, and such. So what we have today is that there are 35 different cities in Miami-Dade County, and coming out of a bad economy, all of them are looking to be competitive. Some of these places are very, very small. Some are very, very big. Some may fail. Some may merge. Some may expand. But certainly most cities are looking at their options now that the ban on annexations has been lifted. So what are we faced with in Homestead? This is a map of South Dade, and we have a certain amount of developable land. And this is a cartoon map of what we would say the developable land is. In the green is the area inside the urban development boundary. There's an annexation commission that is, or study group that's underway right now, and it is right at this point in time suggesting that no areas outside of the urban development boundary be considered for annexation. They want to be kept at the county, like to keep those within the municipal services area of the county. And the main reason is that they don't want to encourage development out in those areas, because really your intensity needs to be at 1 unit per 5 acres, and they don't want to encourage leapfrog development out there. So to explain that a little bit further, we look at South Dade, and it had grown up in 2 distinct areas. And this map portrays the urban centers of Homestead and Florida City versus the urban center of Miami. And you can see that in the 1970s, these were 2 distinct areas that end up starting to grow together. By the 1980s, you saw that the Homestead area, not necessarily within the city of Homestead, but the area what people call Homestead, was starting to develop up the US 1 corridor. At the same time, Cutler Ridge was starting to come down the US 1 corridor, and they were just about touching by the 80s. And then by today, we have the 2 areas that have essentially grown together along the US 1 corridor. What we also see is that the urban development boundary, that area in green, is less than a mile from US 1 at certain points along the corridor. So what we have today is tremendous pressure on growth. We're one of the fastest growing states in the nation. We're in one of the fastest growing regions in the state, and the projections show that we could expect up to 30,000 people a year to come into South Dade. Really, when you start to look at it, this is where the bulk of the open land exists. So what we have is today, we have a moratorium that's lifted, we have a process that's codified, and we have a policy, though, that's uncertain. It's yet undetermined if the county will come around and suggest that all the unincorporated areas join up with a city or become a city themselves. So that policy is uncertain. So that process is being modified. So what we're really here to talk about today is our options. Do we want to consider an annexation, or do you not want to consider an annexation? And what we're suggesting that if you do want to consider an annexation, there's really a 3-step process or a 3-phase process that we would suggest you undertake. The process culminates with a formal application to Miami-Dade County. But before you get there, you really need to take a look at the surrounding communities and see if there are any that are right for you. And right for you means we'd have to look at the character of the areas. We would have to look at the cost to provide those services. And then if, in fact, you found an area that fit your needs, both from a character and a cost point of view, and you decided to take the next step, then you would develop a formal application. So what we have just simply drawn here is a very conceptual map of the areas immediately adjacent to the city, which you may want to consider. Now this is just comes out of the staff's mind's eye. It has nothing to do, we haven't looked at any of these things in any great detail. We have just put these on for the discussion purposes only. We can expand these, we can contract these, we can ignore these. either way, there was 4 different areas. The first one, we really looked at squaring off the boundaries of the city as a start. Homestead North, the area west of US 1 and south of 88th Street. The second area was south of 88th Street, or 288th Street, I'm sorry, between US 1 and the Turnpike. We looked at squaring off the boundary to the west of the city, and then we looked at Homestead East, which was really everything between 288th and 352nd, all the way out to the bay. Now this does pick up pieces of the Air Reserve Base, and it does pick up pieces of Turkey Point, both who will definitely want to have a say in this. So as we looked at a phase 1, we would...
Joe, would you mind, just since you had that map up, could you clarify, though, some of the areas that people are talking about that it does not include on that map? Like, for example...
There is a community that I've been made aware of that had gone through an incorporation procedure in the last several years, and it apparently was shut down as part of the moratorium. That is up the US 1 corridor north of the city of Homestead. Some of that area is in our pink area, Area 1, and some of it is north of our area outside of the US 1, outside of what we've drawn on the map. And so Redland, the area outside of the urban development boundary, is not being considered through this map. And we haven't really purposefully looked at anything outside the urban development boundary. It's probably not something that you would want to do. Again, it's got a very low density land use, 1 unit per 5 acres, and probably very costly to provide services from the city of Homestead in an area outside of the urban development boundary. So, if you're going to look at doing something like this, we'd suggest the first phase where we look at the character of the communities. That's just a demographic analysis where we would look at the existing and future land uses planned in the area, the zoning, the political boundaries, various generators like the base or parks, churches, schools, existing enclaves in the area. Then some more specific demographic information, age, education, household income, those types of things. And then we would identify, just write a report and show you the areas of interest. We'd move then to a second phase, which would be the cost. And what we really need to do in this phase is figure out what it's going to cost the city of Homestead to provide services in all these services areas like police, fire, water, sewer, streetlights, parks, planning, at the same level that we provide them to the existing citizens right now. We want to provide those services at the same level. What's it going to cost us, and what would the tax rate, the resulting tax rate be? What would the tax rate for those folks that were going to be annexed, and what would the tax rate then need to be for the people in the city of Homestead? We feel that we can probably do an analysis like this on any of these, all these areas between 1 and 3 months in the future. And if you decided to go do this and found an area that you thought you wanted to look at a little bit further, then we would suggest that you got into phase 3, which was the formal application. Now this is a pretty complicated piece of work that needs to be done. It's potentially expensive, it's potentially time consuming, and it can be very political. It is outlined in the county code, so they give us a specific methodology and set of pieces that we need to accomplish as we submitted the application, but again, it can be a little bit complex. With that, I will open it up for discussion.
Yes. Thank you, Vice Mayor Burgess. I'm a little perplexed, and I have some philosophical differences. When we talk about this annexation, let me just poll the room if I can. How many persons that are sitting in here in these potential zones now that we're looking at, how many of you want to be annexed? Stand up. If you want to be annexed into stand up. You want to be annexed, one person. Okay. Now, I can already tell that this looks like it will be a tremendous battle. My other issue that I'm dealing with is the cost of the services. Mr. Manager, how many police officers are we down now? How many, we're supposed to be at, how many police officers are we supposed to have at our current level of services?
See, I'm used to talking on this thing. I can't find the button. Anyway, based on the numbers, 1 per 1,000, we're looking at probably anywhere from 25 to 30 police officers short right now.
Short. Now, in my research, I found that some of these places, let's take Leisure City, crime is very high. How, if we're already down with what we have now, 25 to 30 officers, how in the world are we going to be able to, with what we're talking about, keep the level of services when we're already down as it is now? What is the mechanism of plan? And will the tax revenue that we are looking at, how would that compensate for, if we're already 30 officers down now, 25, 30 officers down now, how would the tax revenue generate to be able to even cover some of those kind of services? That's my philosophical question that I'm wrestling with, because at this point in time, if we can't maintain the level of services that we have now, how in the world are we going to be able to do that?
Are you asking?
I'm asking
Sure.
Mr. Grexis.
Couple of things. First of all, obviously, step one was, we had a request for, gee, should we look at annexation? So the first thing is to decide, is there interest amongst the elected body to look at annexation? Part of that looking at annexation includes this study. The study typically will tell you not only the cost side of it, but also the revenue side. So theoretically, if you take a particular area, they're already generating revenue through property taxes, and that revenue theoretically pays for the services, so that revenue goes over to your side as well. So the study will tell you whether the annexation of a particular area is revenue neutral or not. Do you end up with a scenario where the whole boundary is costing you more money or bringing in more money, or everything kind of balances out? In some communities that annex, where it ends up becoming neutral for them is that they have a pot of money that's being generated through taxes, and the local government that takes over that area is using that money to pay for the services. And
Right.
so, and a key component, as you mentioned, which is that every annexation also includes a democratic process of the area in question, whether they want to be annexed. In some cases, communities want to be annexed, and in some cases they do not want to be annexed, and in some cases they compete for a particular city. So in a couple of cases where I came from, in Fort Lauderdale, the community wanted to be annexed, and so it went to the ballot, and the voters in the area voted for it.
Mhm.
In some cases, there were 2 cities on the ballot, and they chose another city but ours. And so it really depends on the community, but it first starts with the elected body looking at this and saying, do we want to even grow at all? And if so, do we want to take a look and see what areas might make sense for us? And the whole question about service is a very real one, because as you know, our tax base has decreased by 54% over the
Right.
last 4 years.
Right.
And so you'd want to know right off the bat, if you're going to take on an annexation, is this something that's going to end up costing you money? On the other hand, no sense looking at it if you have no interest in growing, because it doesn't matter what the results are if you don't want to do it. And then another important component which you mentioned is, if you know a particular area does not want to annex, then studying it probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, because you're not going to win the voting. So, on the other hand, that's all part of, this is like the germination of a process.
I understand.
And, so that's...
Well, let me say this. because I think if we are to move forward with any process, I feel that there ought to be of course, a participation or a community that says we really want to be a part of that. The other issue is that persons or areas that we're going to be annexing is that their taxes are going to go up because for the simple fact they become part of us, and then our millage rate and all of our other things that we have in place, not only would they have a portion of what they're already paying, but then they're going to have to be acceptable to what we're already doing now. And I at this point, I feel that if we can't already afford where we are at this point, I just don't see how we're going to reasonably, if we're already down now, I don't see how reasonably that we'll be able to take on other portions that we really cannot afford to service at this point in time. And even with the revenue that will be coming in, I don't think perhaps, and I think we will be at a negative with anything, because we're already starting off the back down with manpower. And so I appreciate the staff, and I appreciate all the hard work that has gone into it. But I just don't see how it will feasibly work for us in a financial way that we can continue with the level of services to provide a whole nother set of a population. And that's what I'm wrestling with up here now. I just don't see how it will work. I'm all for growth, but I'm for growth that is manageable, and growth that that we can take on, and to where it'll be expense and revenue neutral, and that we're not going into even more of an area that we can't really afford to go in, and that we can't really provide the necessary services to the people. Thank you.
Mr. Shelley.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I guess follow-up questions to what Councilman Williams had asked for, and I do agree with him, and I think that as far as an actual annexation plan, those things are very important as far as knowing the answers. Are they revenue neutral? Are they not revenue neutral? Do the persons who are trying to annex, do they want to be part of our city or not be part of our city? But my understanding is that the study that is being proposed to answer just those questions, and that is not just to be on a whim what we think may or may not be a result, or what our tax revenues may or may not be, but to actually have hard facts and data. Is that correct? That's kind of what this is being proposed to do, just so I'm understanding the process?
Right. This is basically testing the question, do you have an appetite for apple pie, right? And so if the answer is yes, but you want to know how much does the apple pie cost, how many calories are it, how long is it going to take, then we'll start answering all those questions. But if you don't have an appetite for apple pie, then it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to move to the next level. We looked at it as staff when the issue was raised to us as, geez, other cities are looking at annexation, should we be looking at it as well? And so we tried to be as neutral as possible in giving you your menu options. And so it really comes down to, if you have at least the appetite to look at specific areas, and because if the answer to that is yes, you have an appetite for something, then we need to drill down to which areas specifically would you like us to look at. Now, as we look at that map, as staff, one of the areas that we kind of thought looked interesting to us specifically was the eastern portion, where we take in water. And so when you look at the map and having your city boundary to water for bragging rights purposes, for strategic reasons, that looked interesting enough for us to say, and maybe we should look at it to see what would it cost to do that, what would the implications to be for us, and what does that mean to us long term in terms of the vision for the city, in terms of what that might do for you long term, if anything. But really all Joe is saying here is that if there is interest in annexation, we're going to first need to have some direction that, yes, we're interested in looking at annexation, and then looking at which area we're going to decide on to look at. And then when the numbers come in, you may find this is a very expensive venture. You may find that this is a venture that makes a whole lot of sense for the city. And in either two of those cases, you may find that the area in question doesn't want to be annexed, in which case it's a dead issue. But really, for us, this is not, we're not taking any position other than the question came as, should we be looking at annexation? And so we just wanted everybody to know what the process would be, and that if the only way we can answer the question about, geez, for example, the portion to the east, wouldn't it be nice to have that? I can't give you that answer until somebody looks at all those issues, the demographics, the infrastructure. For example, we don't know, the conditions of the road, the street lights, all the infrastructure that's out there. What does that mean to us as a city? We also don't know what kind of revenue they take in. We don't have the comparison of their tax rates versus our tax rates. Some areas, for example, don't want to be annexed because of zoning issues. For example, they have more lenient zoning issues, or simple things like they don't have street lights and they don't want street lights. So everything really is, there's a whole lot to this. It's like peeling an onion, and there's a lot of layers underneath. But the first step to at least looking at it is for a majority of the board to say, we'd at least like to look at the issue, and then from there, which areas would we like to look at, and that's pretty much what we're asking.
And let me ask a follow-up question. I have some other questions too, but related to one of the things you said, and that is, at what part of this process, during this study, or is it during this study, where we get an idea of, do these areas want to even be annexed in? Because I think that's something that is important to know. Do the residents that we are proposing to annex that property, do they want to be a part of the city? Is that part of the study? Do they look at that? Do they
We
poll?
can incorporate some sort of a survey process as part of the study, whether that is part of the dollar amount you have listed or not, but we certainly could add that as part of the service.
Because I think that is important, and the other things too. I think that growth is not a bad thing, so I'm not opposed to it. I think I would like to look at it. I'm a facts and numbers type of person. I've had that discussion many times here. So for me, I would want to see the hard facts and figures and then make my decision and say, no, I don't want to annex any of these properties, or maybe I want to annex this one but not that one, or a small part of this or a small part of that. So I think that we need to actually do the study to find out the true answers. And the other thing, I guess, the other reason why I believe, and I want to get some clarification on, that we're going through this exercise is that if we don't look into annexation, another city north of us or someplace else may come in and take all the property that we're looking at. And so, although the persons don't want to be part of a city, they may become part of a city and it may not be us. And so I think that what I would like to do is just make sure I have the facts, so that if it comes to that, where there are a choice, they are going to become part of a city. Is it the Homestead or is it some other city? That we all know the ramifications of any choices that might be made. And so, based on that understanding, just make sure I'm correct, and that is that may be the case. The county's essentially opened it up, and it could become a free-for-all for land for cities. And so I think it would be prudent for the city of Homestead to at least have done the analysis and know whether or not it makes sense to even pursue it thereafter.
Joe?
There's no mandate right now by the county that says that they want to divest themselves of all of the unincorporated areas, but the policy question has not completely been answered. So there is a possibility that in the future that they're going to come out and suggest that everybody that's unincorporated right now get that way within a certain period of time. At that point in time, there may not be a choice. The Broward model, I don't think they gave them much of a choice. There was you had 10 years to get with a partner, and so that may be
And the dynamic in Broward was interesting because it was a free-for-all in terms of grab up all the areas that are positive in revenue, and so communities started grabbing up, and then also let's get grabbed up quick before some city that we don't want we end up getting stuck with. And then also there was those that weren't selected at all that felt left out, and they felt, geez, why doesn't anybody want us? And then there was the threat of also being forced to take a particular area, and then so cities started being strategic about, well, if we come out with a plan, an annexation plan that includes a bunch of areas that are positive in revenue, and some that, may not be as positive, but as a package deal, it gets us to the revenue neutral, and then the county thinks we're being fair, and so that was, so that it didn't look as gerrymandered as, and the county would push back in those cases. We don't know what this thing will morph into
Right.
over time, but that's a county politic, that's not us.
And that's why I think that doing the study is not a bad thing, because, again, doing the study does not mean that we are going forward with any annexation of any
Correct.
area. We are just making sure that we have the facts and figures in place in case something were to come where the county mandates certain things, or whether a city to our north decides to try to take up all the land north of us. We have everything we need already to make those decisions. So I don't think the study is bad, because, again, nothing requires us to actually go forward with the annexation. So it's just a matter of getting facts and figures. But I do think it's critical to add to any study that we do to poll the community, because I do want to know whether or not they want to or don't want to be, because not all the communities are here. Some of the communities, there are some leaders within the communities that are able to get the word out there and find out, to get the homeowners here to express their opinion. But there are other communities that may be part of these selections that weren't notified, that didn't know what was going on. And so I think it's imperative as a decision maker to know what those communities want. So that should be part of the process in some form or fashion if possible. That's all for now. I'll reserve any additional comments.
Mr. Maldonado.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I got a few questions as well, and I want to start off with Councilman Shelley just mentioned something that I've actually heard and was one of the questions I had. It's possible, and the discussion's been where other cities are looking to annex, and if we go back to the map, Joe, if you could go back to the map of where the other city is right now, which is Color Bay, and between Color Bay and us, that's all unincorporated Miami Dade, and they might be looking at getting a piece of, like you say, getting a piece of that section.
And if I can interrupt, there is no doubt that I had heard from Cutler Bay maybe 6 months, 8 months ago, where I was told one of their elected officials was very aggressive about moving their boundary, and so there is no doubt they are in the game.
And that's I think it was page 22 on your slide, and that's exactly why I mentioned that, and because I heard the same. I actually heard it from the representative, and they were definitely looking south, and so that was one of my concerns. The question: did the city ever do a study of annexation in the past, Joe?
I do not recall. I know there's policies in our comprehensive plan that have suggested that we do an annexation evaluation by 2010, but I don't have that study.
So there's no record at all if it came up. Does anyone in staff ever, that the city of Homestead did?
Nobody recalls such a study.
Right. I know that you have some information there, but I don't know what part are we going to ask anyone to speak. So we'll hopefully you'll be able to say something. So that was one question. So we have no answer for that. Okay.
I don't know whether there was or there wasn't. The staff that is here doesn't recall one, but that doesn't mean one wasn't done.
My other question is, maybe Vice Mayor through the league, Miami-Dade League Cities, or maybe from anyone else have heard, is this a time-sensitive matter? I mean, obviously there was a moratorium that was put in place. They stopped this, and it's opened up again. Is there a time frame in which we have to answer to the county?
There is no time-sensitive nature to this. This is purely, like the manager suggested, to test your appetite for it. If so, we go it. But there's no deadline for doing anything like this. You could sit on it and wait.
And would anyone happen to know why we stopped it back in? I believe it was 08, wasn't it? Where they stopped the moratorium?
We just got an answer from our Public Works Director that Waterstone had asked to be annexed. He doesn't recall a study being done, but Waterstone had asked to be, that area had been asked to be annexed and now is incorporated into the city, as you know. So that's one example we have of an annexation that anybody on staff can remember.
We also brought some farmland in, I want to say,
On the west side of town. Yeah.
Some land that we brought in, 3 years ago?
More than that, it was probably 5 years ago.
5 years
or
ago,
6
my
years.
time, it all seems, but I know that we did bring in, there was a gentleman that owned some agriculture land out west, that asked, and we did accept it into the city.
And if we did this study, then, if we went forward and we did this study, you would then, we would hope to have those answers of what happened within that time.
Yes.
Did it work? What was the methodology of why they did it, and is it working today?
Sure.
Because we're definitely saying, this is a bigger tax base. Did that work out? So I definitely, if moving forward, and if this council decides to move forward with the study, then I would definitely like to see that included.
One other thing that you'd asked about was the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
While there's no political deadline, there's no legal deadline, the only issue on time becomes, if in fact there's competitors here, when do they get in the game and when do they start engaging, and does that work to your detriment? And that's an answer, that's a question I really don't have an answer for.
Okay. And I would agree with Councilman Shelley as well, where, I'm also someone who wants to know the facts. And so this study, if moving forward and do this study, we're just getting the answers that we need as a city. There are a lot of questions that we have. I know of other areas of the city where they wish they had, the good reports that they hear from our police department, from the leadership area. They said, I wish we had response time. Over there and unincorporated Miami-Dade, their response time, it's a long time. Am I right, Chief? And it's so there's the quality of life factor, or that is also that we need to think about as well. So, and this study again will answer some of those questions, because we'll be able to get out there and ask those other areas, because there's 4 different areas here. It's possible one that's here, sitting here with us today, and maybe not, the other ones are not aware of it. And so I would definitely like for them to know and understand what's happening as we move forward. So I'm okay with the study, and maybe, and I'd like to hear the rest of the council. Fortunately, we have we have folks missing that have all had some type of medical issues, so they're not in. So we don't have a full house. So I definitely would like to still hear from them later on, and what their take on it is. So and then maybe I might come back later and ask you about you were in Broward County as the city manager back then, and maybe share some of the experience of what was happening there. Was it the experiences that you got from there? So sure. That'll be all for right now.
Thank you. I guess one of my questions is looking, and the total sum that I see on my worksheet here is a total of $70,000. Is that about right, Joe, for the 4 different studies and what it would take to figure out the areas?
Yes, sir.
And I guess this would be to to the manager. Where does this money come from? How is it budgeted, or what do we do to have, where would we spend this money out of?
Special studies monies you have.
We have, in the development services budget, we have a line item for professional services that is unallocated, that is just for certain emergency projects that come up like this. For instance, a couple years ago, we had to look at the entire southwest neighborhood and figure out all of the non-conforming uses, and we take those special things and pull them out of that. We figure something's going to come up during the year that we need, and this would be something like that.
So once we get a sense of the extent, whether you're going to do all 4, 3, or 2, then we'll come, when we come back to you for the authorization for the study, we'll have identified the funding sources.
Thank you. I think being proactive and at least being on top of the situation is a good thing for the city. I understand that not everybody is for it, not everybody's against it. But as a city, as the county, please, no yelling from out back. As the county is getting ready to make moves, I think the city needs to be positioned and at least educated on what's out there to determine whether or not we want to do it. And I sit on the Miami-Dade County League of Cities, and with discussions that we've had at the board up there, most cities that are in the county that have areas around them that can be annexed are looking at it, because the county has made although they haven't put anything in writing, they have had discussions, as he's alluded to and as I alluded to earlier, that there's not going to be unincorporated Miami-Dade at some point, no matter what people think and no matter what they want to do. At some point, it's being discussed that the entire county will be under some kind of umbrella. So I think as we move forward, that I think it's smart and prudent of ourselves to educate ourselves and be aware of what's out there and see what we want to do. So I'm for doing the study at this time, and that's simply what it is a study. We may take it, put it on file, and never see it again. Or we may take it and look at it and realize as the county moves forward that we need to move forward. So I think to be an educated city and somebody that sits up here and helps make decisions for it, that I am for the study as we move forward.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Let me say this. I think there needs to be a dialogue. Now, the question was not answered. Did you all program in this budget to have community meetings for what we're talking about?
No, go ahead, Joe.
No, we did not specifically for this. We did.
Thank you. That's it. That's all I want to know.
We'll
Let me make my point. That's my problem. We cannot go into anybody's community where it is unincorporated, what have you, do studies that the people are not involved in. We've got to involve the people in this study. And I would think that would have been the most prudent thing to do in looking at the dollars amount in which you all are doing with the study. We can do that to look, because what it seems like to me is that, yeah, there's a moratorium off of annexations, and yet we're looking to grow however, but then the voice of the people must be heard at some point. And it bothers me that you all didn't even put into consideration to even program monies to be involved to have community meetings in these 4 categories of areas. That bothers me. That's number one. Number 2 is that as we, because it looks like there's a consensus to move forward with the studies. And I think, and you're saying 2 to 3 months for each study. Are they going to be done simultaneously?
You can do them concurrently, yes.
Then in that case, how much staff are we going to have in order to do this, to be able to hear back from the people? How much money have we looked at to do that? Because basically, what you all are proposing tonight does not include the voice of the people. That's number 1. How are we going to accomplish that? How much is that going to cost? Because it's going to be more than $70,000. You're going to have community meetings, you're going to have staffing persons that need to be there, and that's going to be a little bit more than what you all have estimated. And then, go ahead, Mr. Craig.
Well, one of the things that's
I wish you would let me finish before you begin to interrupt, but go ahead. No, I'll yield. Go ahead, because you do that quite often.
One of the things that's important to consider in terms of when the surveys are done is the study sometimes will show benefits to the community that they may not have considered. So that's something also, that do you do the survey before information has been disseminated or afterwards? And so again, that's just a judgment call of the council. But there is an argument on both sides in terms of when to actually do the surveys. And one school of thought is you do the study first, see is it a win-win scenario where the area in fact is substantially benefited by the annexation, and then you do your community outreach, you do the education component, and then you kind of test the waters, or you can do that all at the very beginning. You know, if you do an initial survey and it shows 80 or 90% don't want it, then you can figure out, geez, are we going to be, whatever the benefits are you going to be able to climb out of the misperception. So it really is a judgment call, and it's your decision to make as to whether surveys are done before or after some sort of preliminary data is achieved.
You saying before or after? What are you saying? Then you're saying once the study comes back, then we involve the people? Is that what you're saying?
Right. For example, I don't know whether let's assume it's area 1, whatever that area is. That area may not know that there are substantial benefits to them with annexation. Now, that's a fictitious thing, because I don't know whether they benefit or not from the annexation, but if theoretically the results come back and they benefit from it, then that's something you certainly would want to, discuss with the community first before you make a decision that they don't want to be annexed, because they may, just like us, there may be something that we don't know that they find appealing. Conversely, you may find through the study that there's nothing good for them and there's nothing good for you, in which case it would be lose-lose and nobody would want it. It's really the win-win scenario that you're trying to achieve here, because if there's not a win scenario for the area, then you're not going to get it passed on the ballot. If it's not a win for Homestead, then you're not going to likely have a majority supporting the effort. And certainly if it's a lose-lose, nobody wants it, and a lose-win is kind of a framework that's destined for failure, because if you're a potential winner and the community is going to lose by the annexation, then you're not likely to win the ballot.
Then it goes back to my first statement that I made. If that is the case, and we're already, I'm just using the police department as an example, if we're already 25 to 30 police officers down currently at our state now with no annexation, how do you plan to fill that gap if we're down 25 to 30 officers right at this present moment? What is the plan on at least getting those levels up to where we need to be now with public safety? Because, like I said, it goes back, if we're going to start annexing and we don't have the manpower now, and we can't afford it, because if we could, we have the officers. And so my question is to you, and is how do you plan to beef up the current levels for the police officers to address the current state of our city now before we look at even start to annexation?
The danger in my response is giving you the impression by answering that I support annexation. And I just want to be clear that I am neutral on annexation, absent any studies that indicate one way or the other whether that's beneficial. I hear two questions that were asked, and correct me if I'm wrong. On the question of, geez, how would an area be policed if we annex? And the theory behind annexation is, if they currently have in that area funding for, let's say, 4 police officers that are funded from Miami-Dade County or wherever that's funding those officers currently, because the current area, let's say Area 1, is being patrolled now, even as we speak, and somebody's paying for that, and they're paying for it through their property taxes. The theory behind an annexation is that money and that manpower is shifted over, so nothing changes in terms of level of service. The second question about how do we enhance services within our current boundaries, that certainly is a question at budget time. We're certainly working on the budget now, and the philosophy over the last 3-4 years has been, with 4 years of declining tax base, has been hang on to what you have now before you start building, because there has been no money to add positions. But on the other hand, that's a serious question for us to ask through the budget process as we get closer to the summer.
Okay. So then let me rephrase it. So there's one question that you have to answer. How do you plan to address the issue with the current levels that we're at now? We're down, based on what we were told tonight, 25 to 30 officers. How we plan to deal with that issue if we're already down those amount of officers, to deal with the current state of our city at this moment? before anything else happens?
Until we get some preliminary estimates from the property appraiser's office so we can see what kind of revenue we can expect, obviously I wouldn't be able to answer that right now.
Okay, it's because my problem is, yet what your statement has said is that based on the revenues and tax dollars that are already currently existing in unincorporated Dade, those monies, of course, will be directed towards Homestead to continue the level of services, because we don't have the study in front of us to even know what that is. My problem is, and it's a philosophical difference that I may have, is that I just don't see how we can not deal with what we have today at the current level and then go out and acquire more that we cannot afford, even taking your statement of an appetite for apple pie. If I can't afford an apple pie, I ain't eating no apple pie. I can't even afford to go buy it. So I already know that that's what the issue is. So I just, those are my concerns, and I raise those concerns not to block the process in your study, but those are the differences that I have with where we're at today. And those are my legitimate concerns.
I understand.
Not blocking the process of the studies, but how we, and those are the tough questions you're probably going to have to come back to answer at some point in time. But that's what I wrestle with in going forward to acquire more than what we can actually afford, or bite off more than what we can actually chew. Thank you.
Ms. Waldman?
Well, sorry I was late, but I can assume what probably took place here before I got to the seat. But I've been through this before. Can you hear? Do I have this on?
Yeah.
I've been through this before. You can't hear me? Now can you hear me? Okay. I've been through this before, and I saw today on Facebook, and I saw emails floating around, and the last thing in the world we want is for people to be alarmed. I see Pamela Gray in the audience. Hi, Pamela. And she and I went through this before, didn't we? It's not our first rodeo. And I can tell you that learning what's available is a wonderful thing. It's a growing process for all of us to even think about annexation. But if the people don't want it, as Pamela will tell you, it's not going to happen. But it's just a matter of education. And this is simply a workshop. This is simply finding out what's available to you. If you don't want to be a part of the city, fine. That's fine. The people will speak. But City of Homestead, everybody comes to the City of Homestead and wants something from us too. So in order for us to continue to grow in a steady pace, we have to comply with what's going on around us. And the county has opened up these opportunities. And it's not just our city. There's other cities throughout the county who are looking to incorporate or to combine their cities together. And this is just simply an educational step for us. Your neighbor may want to be a part of the City of Homestead. They may want our fine police department. They may want our services, but others may not. So it's the people that have to speak. And as far as the process goes, this is just the first in many steps of the process. This is just the educational step. And as we go forward, the city may just say, we just don't want to deal with this. We can't deal with this. So we don't know until we look. And our boundaries, they're so different. I mean, you have one set of properties on one side of Homestead, and then, I was interested in Biscayne National Park, Bayfront Park, because, I thought that would be really good to, if the county would allow us to annex that, then we would at last have waterfront property that would bring our value up as far as tourism and enterprise and business. But this is just a first step, and I beg you not to become alarmed and think that this is happening, because nothing's happening except that hopefully we're going to open a book, turn a page, and learn what's available. That's it. That's it. And if we don't do it, when the county tells us now's the time that we're interested in allowing annexation, then we all miss out because we miss out on the knowledge. So that's all I want you to know. And I've always been of the belief that if the people don't want it, then we don't do it. But we owe it to everyone, including ourselves, to at least investigate it, at least find out what's available and what isn't available. So with that being said, thank you, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Shelley.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just have a follow-up question, or actually I have a comment and then a follow-up question. The first is that, I think I concur with Councilman Williams' point in that he's trying to make the point that we should not expand outside our borders or add additional responsibilities to our city if we can't maintain the current responsibilities that we have possibly, or that we're already understaffed. And so I concur with him on that. And so, but I think that's what this study is supposed to show us. That's what I'm expecting the study to show me is this even a feasibility issue? But having the actual facts and figures going forward. So I have the same concerns, and I guess I'm delivering a similar message in that, I think it's critical to know our police force and whether or not we can even maintain or deal with additional properties. But again, to me, this is a study. That's a lot farther down the pipeline, because I haven't even made a decision whether I support or don't support the annexation at all. I'm willing to learn about it. I'm willing to get the information from this study, and I'm willing to analyze that information, but I don't know whether I'm for or against the actual annexation at the end. But that'll be determined as we get the information.
Right, and one important point that I forgot to mention is that just like in some cases annexation can mean it's going to cost you more and cause more problems than you want, you may find, and I'll give you a fictitious scenario. There's a St. Regis hotel next door that's property valued at $1 billion, and they want to be in your city for a specific PR reason, and all it means is annexing a certain portion, and it's not going to cost you any more policing, it's not going to cost you any more infrastructure. Then that brings more revenue into your city that you can use for other issues. So it really depends on the scenario, and you really won't know that unless you look at it. Because in some cases it can be positive, it can be negative, or it can be neutral. And I really, on any one of those four areas, I can't give you that answer at this time.
Okay. And then my follow-up question deals with the property or the maps, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, the areas that we are doing the study on. Our electric service currently goes outside of our city limits, in that we provide service to customers that aren't currently within our location. Do all those areas, is our electric service covered by the proposed, or is there additional areas outside of the areas we're proposed?
Our electrical boundaries go up to Southwest 280th Street, between 192 and 152 Avenue. I have a map here, Councilman Shelley,
okay,
if you'd like, that shows the boundaries of the current city and the boundaries of the electrical utility. But to answer your question, no.
Okay. And the reason I ask that question is because I do frequently get stopped by people who are not City of Homestead residents who are complaining about possibly something to do with the electric or the typical things that we hear. And so I would think that when we look at any annexation areas, that we might want to try to include or encompass that entire electric service grid, so that those particular people, if they become annexed in or they choose to be annexed in, can then have a say more directly on the power that's being provided. I think it makes logistical sense. So I just wanted to ask that question more or less, and possibly whether we want to adjust any of these areas.
And you would to do that, would be moving the boundary up to 280th Street. Everything else, the remainder of the customers are in the city boundaries.
Okay. So that's just a raising a point, just for consideration.
Well, that's what, if you're planning to give us direction on the question of, are we doing a study? And then the second question, if the answer is yes, then we need what areas are we going to study? Is it any one or all of the four on that list? And then also, if there's anything in additional to that you're interested in us doing, but we're going to need some direction on those two questions.
Maldonado.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the difficult part, and I was going to lead up to where, one, just because we're still missing two other elected officials here, and I would definitely like to hear what the majority of our elected officials would have to say. Their voice needs to be heard, and unfortunately, like I said, they're not able to make it. And if we decide not to make a decision today, it's right. It's okay. That's why I asked the time-sensitive question. But moving forward, you know, obviously we start.
I doubt very much that a day, a week, or a month is going to knock you out of the box.
I always ask the question: is this time-sensitive? When we did the Air Force issue, that was my question as well. So, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a specific comment, but where are we going at this point? What are you asking for? I mean, what decisions?
I think Mr. Maldonado brings up a good point. There's 7 people on this board, and for an expenditure that we're looking at, I would like to have all 7 people here. And hear everybody. Somebody may have a point that hasn't been raised that sways my ideas altogether. So I would like, good with the rest of the board here, the council, excuse me, that we would put this on a formal agenda and have more dialogue about it when all 7 people are present. Perhaps at the May, to give us plenty of time for everybody, make sure everybody's healed and has no problems. Perhaps the May council meeting, whichever.
Mr.
May
Vice
the
Mayor?
15th would be our council meeting, which would be, what, 40 days out?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I was just going to, because we're allocating funds to this, we're going to have to vote on this at a meeting anyways, correct? Yeah, so I think that's a good idea then to have it for a set meeting that we can
Mr.
discuss.
Williams?
Oh, I'm fine.
Are you all right with moving it to that date?
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Just before we move on, I wonder if would it be okay, Mr. Manager or the council, so that we don't kind of pick up, start all over with other 2 elected officials. Hopefully they're able to see this video or the minutes and kind of catch up with where we're at, and then maybe you sit down and talk with them, or have Mr. Corradino discuss it with Ms. McCormick and Mr. Bateman as well, and just kind of catch them up.
Absolutely.
I think that'd be the best thing to do, so that when we're coming in May, you know, they could bring their notes, and we'll hear what they have to say, and then we can move forward from there. Kind of just don't want to restart when we get back to May.
Ms. Waldman?
I'm fine with that. I think it's important because this is only a workshop, and we've all had some difficulties. I know I have family health issue and others, and Ms. McCormick's husband just got out of the hospital tonight, so I would love to hear what they have to say. However, I would say this, is that I received a letter from the Homestead Air Force Base from Mr. Ventura, and I think that might be one area that we could really consider whether or not we should be researching that area of Homestead, because you know, we want to comply with what the Air Force Base needs and wants, and that's something I think should be in some private sessions with the manager, Mr. Corradino, Mr. Ventura, if you might meet with them and let them know what the base is thinking. Again, you know, my main priority was Bayfront Park, you know, because of the economic and industry boost I think that would bring to us. As far as the other regions go, you know, I'm willing to listen to what the other council people say before I make a decision, but I'm good with waiting. I think it's very important to wait and make sure we make the right decision. And I respect everything that our colleague, each of my colleagues
I think it also, and I think it also gives the public that perhaps is just seeing this for the first time tonight, doesn't understand it, can ask questions, come back to us, send us their concerns, call us at reasonable hours, please. But, I mean, we can answer questions, and we can hear their concerns and see what they are. I think it's a give and take, and that gives us a little bit of time for us maybe to hear the people that are here tonight and let them voice what they've heard tonight and their concerns back to us. So, I mean, I think we'll move it to that meeting, if everybody agrees, for May the 15th. And like we said, folks, it's simply to do a study or not to do a study. It could be papers that we get accumulated through whatever process Development Services does, and they may be put in a file and put underneath the desk and never moved, as we found out that all areas are negative effects on what we have already. So, and I think that, you know, with that being said, that unless there's any other comments, we'll just go ahead and close it and move it to the May 15th council meeting.
Yeah. I would just one comment, and I think I'd like to ease what Councilman Williams says is the people definitely need to be heard, and I would guess that in moving forward, going with these studies, we would have, when we're addressing the communities, that we would be there present as well and able to discuss it with them. So in other words, I want to make sure that there is a forum, again, so that we could hear the concerns. And obviously we've all said it, but because you just mentioned that we're going to get phone calls and emails and stuff like that. And I will, you know, answer questions one-on-one, but I think it's going to be best when we're all together and discussing the item.
Councilwoman, excuse me, Mr. Shelley. Been waiting patiently. You were down there a minute ago.
Yeah.
Well, I had a comment then, but then I changed my mind. But I do want to say the only thing is make sure that when we start having comments and discussions about this, that I think it's good that we're all together, but I think it's also important that we bifurcate this into the sections, because otherwise we're going to hear, you know, maybe one whole section is negative and doesn't want anything to do with it, and so we need to hear that from that area so that we can determine maybe we want to go ahead and remove them from the process.
That's right.
But we also don't want to make sure that there's another area that wants it and they all get mixed in with the negative and the positive. So we need to make sure that when we have this discussion, it's done orderly and by area, so that we're very clear on the messages that each area is giving to us and have the right discussion.
That's good.
Ms. Waldman.
I'm assuming that it will go the same way that it's gone in the past, and that is that we definitely have workshops and forums where the people can get up and have their time to say what they need to say, and not just an hour workshop. And Pamela, you remember we had multi-hour opportunities where we were able to hear from you and know what you need and know what you want, know what the city might be able to offer you. So there is a whole process, and you don't have to just rely on this council. We have a city staff that's available to meet with you and answer any questions. I would caution you, and I ask that you maybe get with Pamela. Pamela, raise your hand so people know who you are. She did, I know. But I mean, she did it the right way. She got her entire community involved, and it's not right to get up and speak for a community when you don't have the community support behind you. So that's something that you can be doing now. And again, this is just a study. You might find that you might really want to be part of our lovely city, but you know, you might not. But and we may not be able to afford you. So, you know, that's what this study is all about, is finding out what we can do. So, but definitely, I'm hoping it's the same process as all annexations have been before, Joe, and that is to always keep the people involved and have a Saturday afternoon when people are off from work, and let us have a real workshop as we grow closer and we determine what areas we deem to be study and what areas not to study. So thank you.
Thank you. And, so we're clear on where we're going, or you need anything else from us?
I'm good.
And one comment, if we could, for the clerk. Can we make sure that this is the early on item that night, so that when the good people come, that we can make sure we get them in and out in an orderly fashion and in a timely manner? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium and state your name and address. Speak up.
My name's Jeff Brown, 401 Northeast 14th Street. Is it my understanding we're not allowed to be to speak tonight?
Well, it's kind of just a workshop. The manager was looking strictly for direction. We're not really in the process of doing public comments and stuff tonight. It was more to inform the council what the staff is trying to recommend, or what the process is for us to move forward on that. And we've given them the direction that we're going to come back on May the 15th, and we will have a full city council meeting that night with comments limited to 3 minutes per person, I believe is what our time is, and things on that. So
okay, well, I just thought, you know, everyone sat out here quietly and listened to y'all speak. I just thought it would be nice if you would sit up here quietly and let us speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, on May the 14th, we will be here for that night. I think it gives everybody an opportunity to write to us, call us, stop by and say hello, have a coffee, voice their concerns with us, and we'll move forward from there. Because this may not even take place. It could come back on that night and get voted down, or the direction changes after hearing the concerns of so many people, or the concerns of people that do want it, that it may not even take place. So I think to sit here tonight and get into a dialogue that may not even be relevant until we see what happens on May the 15th is not where we're headed tonight. So with that, I will close this meeting, or close this workshop. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? If you'd like to come up and talk to staff about the process of how it works, you may come up to them after the meeting. But this meeting has had a motion and it's been closed. But staff would be glad to help, because I can't answer it.
Because that's how you want it. You want it closed. You don't want to hear from us. The simple question was, are you going to alert the other people that do not live in the city that you want to annex in? That is a question that is simple enough, and you can answer that.
I can't answer it because I don't know the process. Do you want to say that?
We're going to have to look at, I don't know what areas we're looking at, so, I mean, if they're asking, are we going to send a mailer to every household in the area? I mean, that was not the plan, no.
Okay.
If we could pass around a pad, I guess, and get addresses if they'd like.
Well, I think a lot of them have put their name down, so, thank you. 5-minute recess, Patty?